When you hear the name Mark Twain, you probably think of Tom Sawyer, maybe Huckleberry Finn, that kind of folksy American humor. But here's the thing. He was also one of the sharpest, most savage satirists to ever pick up a pen. And his favorite target? Well, it was us, human nature. And you're going to see his critiques are just as potent today as they were over 100 years ago.
In that quote, it just nails Twain's whole view of humanity, that deep down, we're all just fundamentally foolish creatures. So for the next few minutes, let's take a little journey through his world. We're going to use some of his lesser-known stories to look at his favorite targets. Our incredible delusions, our, let's call them, flexible morals, and the absolute absurdity of society. First up, a fantastic place to start. A fortune built on fantasy. See, Twain thought one of our greatest superpowers, really, is our ability to fool ourselves. And he showcased this perfectly in a story about a family called the Fosters. So you've got this family, the Fosters, right? They're tracking a stock in the newspaper. And they don't just hope for a little extra cash. Oh no, they go big. After their very first successful trade, on paper, mind you, Alec Foster turns to her husband and says, "The suspense is over, Sally, and we are worth a cold $1,000,000. And how do they celebrate? With a pint of spruce beer, because, as Sally puts it, damn the expense. And from there, the fantasy just completely spirals out of control. For 2 whole years, the Fosters live in what Twain called a splendid delirium. It's like they're living this double life. By day, they're just a normal working-class family. But at night, they're glued to the financial pages, watching their imaginary money just explode, from $1 million all the way up to $300 million. And you think that's wild? It just keeps going and doubling again, until they hit this absolutely bonkers figure, $2,400 million. That's an income of $120 million a year. And remember, all of this is completely, totally fake. They haven't seen a single cent. But managing this fake fortune, well, that's starting to become a real job.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this totally fake fortune starts to have real consequences. To keep up with their imaginary stocks, they have to start breaking the Sabbath. It was the one moral line they hadn't crossed. They fell, as Twain says, for a fortune that only existed in their heads. And this is his whole point, isn't it? Our delusions, the stories we tell ourselves, they can mess up our actual lives.
Okay, so we've seen how good we are at fooling ourselves. But what about the stories we tell other people? That brings us to our next section, the good lie, the bad book. Twain was just fascinated by the weird, contradictory relationship we have with truth and fiction. So let me ask you, are all lies sinful? That is the big question in another one of his stories. You've got a doctor who's looking after a dying mother and her very sick child, but they're in separate rooms. The mother's only comfort, the only thing keeping her going, is the belief that her child is okay. So the doctor, to spare her agony, tells her the child is getting better. But this sends the woman's 2 super pious sisters through the roof, because they believe every lie is a one-way ticket to damnation. So you've got this clash of ideas, right? On one side, you have the sisters with their black and white, no excuses view. A lie is a lie, period, even to save someone. And on the other, you've got the doctor, who basically calls them hypocrites. He argues they tell little polite lies all the time, and that his lie was benevolent and sinless, a necessary kindness. For Twain, this is classic stuff. Rigid, unbending morality up against messy, compassionate, real life. And you know, while some people are busy justifying their little white lies, Twain found others who were creating these huge, magnificent fictions without even realizing it. He once reviewed a novel where he said its only real charm was the total and miraculous absence of any good qualities at all. So get this. A character says this to a young lawyer he has just met. It's the perfect example of what Twain called the McClintockian style. It's just a hurricane of flowery, meaningless words that sound super important but mean absolutely nothing. And it just gets better. This is a father's advice to his son. What does that even mean? Twain's whole deal here is that the author is so cluelessly earnest, so completely unaware of how ridiculous he sounds, that he accidentally creates comedy gold. It's a fiction so grand, it makes the doctor's little white lie look tiny. Okay, so we've covered fooling ourselves, and we've covered the stories we tell others. Now let's zoom out and look at society as a whole. Twain absolutely loved to expose public hypocrisy, especially the totally baffling logic we use to decide who's a hero and who's a villain. So check out this tale of two cousins. First, you've got Edward Mills. This guy is a model citizen, hardworking, honest, devoted to his family. He does everything by the book. Then you've got his cousin, George Benton, a total scoundrel, a drunk, a gambler, a forger. He destroys his family, tanks his business, a complete disaster. So who do you think society rallies around? Every single time George hits rock bottom, guess what? Society swoops in to save him. He even becomes a celebrated speaker on the temperance circuit. Meanwhile, good old Edward falls on hard times and crickets. He's totally forgotten. He can't even get help from the prisoner's friend society because, he's never actually been to prison. And the ending is it's the perfect cynical cherry on top. Edward gets murdered during a bank robbery, and the guy who leads the gang of burglars, it's George Benton. But even then, after he's sentenced, George finds religion, and his cell is flooded with flowers from weepy admirers. When he's finally executed, this is what they put on his headstone. The good guy is murdered and forgotten, while the scoundrel gets remembered as a saint. It's a perfect, brutal takedown of public virtue. All right, after all that craziness with society, Twain zooms way, way in, all the way back to the most basic human dynamic there is, the relationship between a man and a woman. And he does this by imagining he's found the diaries of the very first two people on Earth, Adam and Eve.
So let's start with Adam's diary. From his point of view, this new creature is just a pain. He's grumpy, he's analytical, and he is completely baffled by her. She talks nonstop, she clutters up his perfect garden by naming everything. In his eyes, she's basically an illogical, annoying experiment.
But now, flip the page to Eve's diary from that exact same time. It's like she's living in a totally different universe. While Adam is stewing in annoyance, she thinks he's just shy and is secretly pleased to have her around. She sees her naming everything not as an irritation, but as a helpful service that he's evidently very grateful for. Same garden, two completely different realities. But here's the beautiful turn. Years go by, life happens, they get kicked out of the garden, they have kids, and Adam's entire perspective shifts. He writes this just incredibly poignant line. It's this final, profound realization. The creature he once found so irritating has become the absolute center of his world. And it's this incredibly moving moment where you see Twain wasn't just a cynic. He had this deep, deep understanding of what connects us. So there you have it, from our wild self-delusions to our crazy social rules and right down to our most personal relationships. Twain's lens shows us these timeless truths about ourselves, and it really leaves us with one final thing to think about. If he were alive today, watching our world of social media, 24-hour news, political theater, what glorious, absurd, and deeply human follies do you think he'd be writing about now?